Coming back to life, I intentionally arrived late, delaying getting the marriage certificate with Lisa. In my previous life, after Lisa found out I was sick, she disappeared with Frank for 20 years. Later, when I was on the brink of death, she returned. She looked at Frank's photo and asked me, if we'd waited a little longer before getting married, would things have turned out differently? When I realized I'd been reborn, Lisa stood at the dorm door, waiting for me to go get the marriage certificate. I lied that I needed to deliver something to a colleague, sending her off to the marriage registration office ahead of me. After parting with Lisa, I headed up the mountain. I lay in Uncle Wong's rocking chair, watching the sea of clouds in front of his house, soaking up the sun. Uncle Wong handed me a roasted sweet potato and curiously asked, "Aren't you supposed to get your license with Lisa today? What are you doing here?" I took a bite of the hot sweet potato, laughing as I replied, "I had a nightmare, and I haven't been able to shake it off." Uncle Wong comforted me, saying, "It was just a dream. What's important is living your life. Once you marry Lisa, life's good, no need to fear nightmares." I paused for a moment, nodding with a smile. "You're right, Uncle. I'll leave after staying for a bit. Marrying Lisa? That's not happening this time around. In my past life, after Lisa and I registered our marriage, we just walked out of the office. She bumped into a young guy. His name was Frank, and he lived in the village where we worked. On our way back, Lisa was silent. I thought she was just being mindful as a married woman to avoid suspicion with male colleagues. I didn't realize, until I was nearly dead, that from that bump, Lisa fell for Frank at first sight. She wasn't avoiding suspicion. She was regretting not waiting a day to get the certificate with me. After that day, Lisa grew cold towards me. She often stared towards the village, deep in thought. When I asked her, she'd just dodge the question. When I asked too much and was too busy with work, I stopped asking altogether. I thought that once she'd sorted things out, she'd talk to me. After the project ended, Lisa and I were assigned to different projects and lived apart. I thought it was temporary, but every time there was a reassignment after that, we'd end up miles apart. I mentioned it to Lisa, and she would simply say, "Just following orders." Until one day, I returned to Sea City for a report. Hearing my colleagues talk, I realized apart from the first assignment, all the other times were requests made by Lisa to our superiors. We had a huge argument. She apologized, but never explained. The next morning, she was gone. I thought our marriage was over. Surprises always throw you off guard. I fell ill. After that, Lisa, unlike before, started taking care of me attentively. She awkwardly learned to cook for me and would take walks with me each night. Then, one day, Lisa vanished. I asked around, searched for her for so long. No one knew her whereabouts or even if she was alive. I started doing everything alone. I thought she was dead. But on my deathbed, she showed up. It was then that I found out, for the past 20 years, she'd been with Frank. They adopted a daughter and showered her with love. Frank passed before her, weighed down by his regrets. His regret was not being her husband in this life. Lisa told me she was sorry, yet she was resentful, and that puzzled me. If she didn't love me, why not just tell me? She could have divorced me and made a home with Frank, instead of leaving her spouse and ignoring her parents. What right did she have to resent me? My daughter, whom I raised, said she envied the adopted girl for the love she received. She blamed us for bringing her into this world without asking her. Only then did I find out she'd been in contact with her mother, hiding it from me. I stayed at Uncle Wong's for an hour. After saying goodbye, I headed straight to the marriage office. Just as I arrived, I saw Lisa helping Frank up. I watched Lisa gazing at Frank, mesmerized. Back then, lost in helping Frank and chatting with him, I missed Lisa's reaction. Now, seeing from an outsider's view, it was so obvious. "Lisa, I'm here. You tired of waiting?" Seeing me, Lisa froze and quickly became flustered. "Oh, Eric, you're here." I noticed Frank's expression as he looked at me, different from the last life, filled with complex emotions, maybe even envy. When I glanced back at him, he seemed back to normal, as if it was all in my head. I was curious. This time the marriage certificate hadn't been obtained, and Lisa met Frank earlier. What would she choose? Break up with me and choose Frank? Or get the certificate with me and fly off with Frank like last time? It's getting late. Shall we go register? I pretended to rush. Lisa's face paled. Ouch, my foot hurts. Frank's timely exclamation broke the momentary silence. Last life, Frank wasn't hurt. But now? And the timing's just too perfect. Could he have been reborn too? I inspected Frank closely, but found nothing. Lisa took Frank to the clinic. The doctor said, besides a wound that would have healed soon, there was nothing else. Frank's face flushed, but Lisa looked happy. On our way back, passing the marriage office, Lisa hesitated. Eric, they're closed. How about we come back tomorrow? I responded casually, we'll see, gotta pick a good day for getting hitched. But in this life, there won't be a good day for that. I smiled as Lisa sighed. All right, I'll let Uncle Wong know. Lisa and I came by bicycle. On the way back, Frank jumped into Lisa's car without hesitation. Lisa glanced at me, a bit embarrassed, but didn't refuse. I pretended not to see anything and rode my bike ahead. A cool breeze carried the sounds of Frank and Lisa talking. I couldn't make out what they were saying, but I could tell they were happy. And there was Lisa's deliberately restrained laugh. How long has it been since I've seen Lisa laugh? In my past life, it seemed that after meeting Frank, Lisa never smiled at me again. But now, none of this matters to me anymore. As we entered the village, the villagers saw Frank in Lisa's car. When they looked at me, they either winked or shook their heads disapprovingly. I knew what they were trying to say, but I just smiled and headed back to the dorm. Lisa had already rented a place for our future married life, moving most of her stuff there. As I passed by the house, I stopped. It had 2 bedrooms on either side, a main living area in the center, and a small courtyard. In my past life, after coming back from the marriage registration office, I saw the big red decorations at home, feeling blissful. No one knew that the day before getting our marriage license, the bride had happily decorated the wedding house. But on the wedding night, the warmth faded away. That night was like countless lonely nights to follow. We lay silently in bed, doing nothing, unable to sleep. Lisa didn't come to find me at dinner like she used to. I went to the cafeteria alone with my meal container. In the cafeteria, I saw Lisa and Frank sitting across from each other, serving each other food. I didn't know what Lisa said, but Frank covered his mouth, laughing. When Lisa saw me, she paused, stood up quickly. Eric, you're here. Frank just got back. There's nothing at home, so I brought her here to get something to eat. We were going to bring you some. Didn't expect you would be this early. Early? There were already few people left in the cafeteria, and hardly any food. It reminded me of our past life. After we got our marriage license, Lisa said she'd get food from the cafeteria. It took her forever to come back, and she was empty-handed. She just said, there wasn't any food left, just bear with it tonight. That night, the only sound was my stomach growling. Turns out, back then, Lisa had already started taking care of Frank. I didn't say anything as I walked past her and took whatever leftover food back to the dorm. Halfway through my dinner, there was a knock on the dorm door. It was Lisa and Frank. Lisa looked at me, her expression complicated. She cleared her throat lightly. Eric, I need to talk to you about something. I looked at her silently. Lisa glanced at Frank beside her, who was standing cautiously, her eyes full of tenderness. When she spoke again, there was a firmness in her voice. Eric, Frank just got back. You know he's all alone, and his place hasn't been lived in for a while. Needs some cleaning. Since we haven't officially tied the knot, I thought maybe we could let Frank stay at our place for a few days. I glanced at Frank. In this life and the past, I saw 2 completely different Franks. If I didn't know better, I'd say Frank has been reborn. But I don't have time to play into his act. I don't want this woman anymore. No matter what Frank does, it's irrelevant to me. Sure, it's your place, you decide. Lisa didn't expect me to agree so quickly. Her prepared words got caught in her throat, unable to come out. But I don't like people touching my stuff. I'll move my things out later, I said. Lisa quickly replied, no need. I'll move your things to another room. Realizing she not only wanted Frank in our wedding house, but also in my bed, made me chuckle softly. I saw Frank curl his lips into a smile too. After dinner, I took a flashlight to gather my things from the house. When I arrived, Lisa was making a bed for Frank, using the sheets I'd picked out for our wedding night. Lisa was surprised to see me. "Eric, why are you here? I've already moved your stuff to my room." "Oh," I replied casually and turned to pack my things. Lisa followed me, her expression complex, with emotions in her eyes I couldn't decipher. "Eric." Just then, Frank popped out from the room. "Lisa, isn't that the sheet you and Eric were supposed to use for your wedding? Is it really okay for me to use it?" Frank's voice trailed off, growing softer. I noticed the tenderness in Lisa's eyes as she looked at him. She turned to me. "Eric, you see, all the sheets at home are new. This sheet," I couldn't miss the flash of satisfaction in Frank's eyes. But he still didn't know that from the moment I came back to this life, I wasn't going to hang on to someone like Lisa. Casually, I said, "You bought the sheet, it's your call." "Thanks, Eric." "Lisa, you're both so good to me," Frank said, beaming. How strange it sounded. Lisa felt it too. But as she turned to me without saying anything, it seemed she was still testing my limits. Frank, realizing something, covered his mouth, pretending to have made a mistake. "Sorry, Eric. I'm sorry. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's really nothing between me and Lisa. Maybe I'll just sleep in my dirty clothes." With that, he reached for the dirty clothes in the package. Lisa quickly stopped him. I reassured Frank, "It's okay, you can sleep well, it's really not a big deal." Lisa couldn't read anything from my face and stood beside us, lost in thought. I was busy packing and didn't pay attention to her. Frank tried to cover up and kept making it worse. He just wanted to provoke me, to appear weak and pitiful in front of Lisa, to make Lisa dislike me. But having lived another life, why would I care? I leaned in close to Frank and whispered in his ear, "Frank, you're overthinking it. Why would I care? Lisa is doing what's best for you, that's understandable. I wouldn't mind if she married you. The question is, would she?" I looked at Frank, smiled, and winked at him. Frank's face turned really bad when he heard that. He couldn't figure out why I'm different from the naive and easily fooled Eric from our previous life. But soon he realized something, and when he looked at me again, he smirked. I finished packing my things and was ready to leave with my bag. Lisa suddenly called out to me from behind. She took a step forward, trying to take the bag off my back. I refused. What a joke. Frank has been reincarnated. Last life, he spent it being the third wheel. In this life, I'm here to straighten things out. He's already treating Lisa as his personal property. I don't want to get involved in their mess. When Lisa saw me avoiding her, her eyes filled with hurt. "Eric, are you upset?" I can explain. Surprising. In our last life, she wouldn't speak up even while wasting my whole life. But now she's speaking up. I already know what she'll say. It's just a way to justify her emotional drift under the guise of caring. Explain? Pointless. Besides, Frank wouldn't agree to it. Sure enough, hearing Frank screech, Lisa didn't bother seeing me off and ran inside. I smirked, adjusted the bag on my shoulder, and walked away. Last life, I was married to Lisa for 21 years, until I died at 45. That's considered dying young. Getting my daughter to her 20s was the result of my unwavering efforts. Ever since Lisa disappeared, I haven't had a good night's sleep. Reborn in this life, I didn't marry Lisa. I didn't exhaust my life due to overwork. My body is healthy. I can finally sleep peacefully. For the first time in 2 lifetimes, I slept soundly without dreams. The next day, I asked for leave from my boss and informed him about my agreement to transfer back to City C. My boss was puzzled. "Didn't you say you didn't want to be separated from Lisa after getting married?" I shook my head. "I won't marry her. Right now, my career is the most important thing." My boss smiled at me, satisfied. In my last life, my boss also advised me. He said, "With your abilities, you can achieve much more." But I was infatuated, and I gave up such a great opportunity for a toxic woman. I asked my boss to keep my departure a secret. We also agreed on the timing of my leave. Leaving my boss's office, I headed directly to the train station. Buying train tickets at this time required standing in long lines. As I biked past the house, I saw through the fence Lisa and Frank brushing their teeth in the yard. Lisa naturally took a towel from the clothesline and gently wiped Frank's hands. Frank looked at her with deep affection. It seems things have significantly changed between them overnight. When they saw me biking past the gate, Lisa's face went pale, and she quickly distanced herself from Frank. I looked away, ignoring the guilty conscience and the look of hurt. Remembering my way, I made it to the train station. After paying to keep my bike in storage, I followed the crowd into the ticket hall. In this era, people leaving town carried large bags and bundles. From small items like needles to large items like bedding, everyone tried to take as much as they could on the train. Looking at the crowded train station, I decided to take as little as possible, especially bulky items. Sell what can be sold, give away what can't. After standing in line for a long time, I chose a sleeper ticket over a standing ticket. I suffered enough in my last life. This time I want to treat myself better. By the time I left the train station, it was already afternoon. Being out of practice after a lifetime, I forgot to eat while waiting in line for tickets. Skipping lunch, I felt my stomach rumble with hunger. Following my memory, I found the state-run restaurant where Lisa and I once met. Back then, we had a blind date here through a mutual colleague. Lisa was pretty and fair-skinned, the neat and clean type I liked. She was in a technical field like me. Both our families lived in City C. I thought it would make visiting our families easy in the future. She was also satisfied with my appearance. We decided to give it a go. During dating, she wasn't especially nice, but not bad either. She took care of me in life and helped with work-related issues sometimes. There wasn't much romantic spark between us, more a sense of suitability. I thought we'd have a quiet and peaceful life together. But she hit me with an unexpected bombshell. Lisa proposed to me 2 months after we started dating. At that time, she seemed genuinely happy about the idea of marrying me. But first loves couldn't compete with newcomers. Frank's appearance made her feel the thrill of love. Her emotions drifted. Love sometimes appears without reason and grips deeply. But she should never have selfishly abandoned everything for love, wasting my life. After parking the bike, I entered the restaurant. There weren't many people at this time, so I immediately spotted Lisa and Frank in the corner. Frank saw me first. He stood up and waved enthusiastically. "Eric, here to eat? Perfect. Lisa and I are here, join us, don't be shy. It's just setting an extra place." Certainly lives up to the name of a top-tier charmer who stole another's wife for over 20 years. 2 sentences in, he looked like he was in charge. "Oh, no need to bother, wouldn't want to interrupt your date." I smiled, glancing at Lisa. Lisa paled, nervously getting up to pull a chair for me. "Eric, don't misunderstand. Lisa and I aren't what you think. Lisa just thought I was too skinny and wanted to help me out." Sure, he managed to boast again. I ignored Lisa and sat down next to Frank. Lisa awkwardly touched her nose and sat down too. When I saw the table full of delicious dishes, I was shocked. Wow, this meal must have cost Lisa at least half a month's salary. She's so generous to Frank. Frank gave me a piece of braised pork. "Eric, try this braised pork," he said. Lisa said it's the best in town and insisted we order it. She even said she'd pack some for me to take home. "Here, take a bite. And the fish, too. You have to try the fish. I've never had fish this good." Lisa said she knows how to cook, and once we're back, she'll make it often for me. Wait, Lisa can cook? Last time I got sick, she was a disaster in the kitchen, breaking things left and right. I ended up doing the cooking myself. Turns out love can be faked. I savored the braised pork. It was genuinely delicious. Things from this era taste real. The pork was full of flavor, and the river fish didn't have that oiliness that comes with later times. It was truly fresh. As I enjoyed the food, I barely noticed what Frank was saying. Frank suddenly screamed, startling me enough to almost drop my chopsticks. "Sorry, Eric. I just got spooked by a fishbone," he laughed. "Where were we? Oh right, Eric. Have you ever tasted Lisa's cooking? If not, come by tonight. Lisa promised me that she'd cook. Isn't that right, Lisa?" Got scared by a fishbone? Really? He clearly noticed I wasn't paying attention and used the bone to draw me back in. Show off all you want. Once I'm gone, I'd like to see who you'll brag to next. You're lucky. I've known Lisa for years, and I never knew she could cook. You two just met, and she's already in the kitchen for you. I'd be thrilled to get a meal tonight. It was supposed to make me jealous beyond measure, but I honestly didn't care. Frank was shocked. During all this, Lisa's expression went from green to white. I kept eating, completely unfazed by their reactions. When the cold tofu dish came, I pushed it towards Frank and Lisa, inviting them to share. The meal grew much quieter after that. Finally, I could enjoy my food peacefully. After leaving the state-run restaurant, I said goodbye to Frank and Lisa and cycled away. I needed to go to the post office to call my parents. In my previous life, after Lisa disappeared, I was left raising the kid alone while also taking care of her parents and working. It was chaos every day. For some reason, even though my background was just as good as theirs, Lisa's parents looked down on me. They refused to help with the kid and found ways to make my life harder. Whenever I showed the slightest dissatisfaction, they'd come to my workplace and cause a scene. Holding on to a stable job wasn't easy back then, especially with a child to support. So I swallowed my pride. When my parents found out, they helped as much as they could while taking care of my kids. They even thought about finding someone else for me to marry. But when Lisa's parents heard, they went to my parents and caused a commotion, accusing us of trying to harm them. Whenever a woman showed interest, Lisa's mom would bring my daughter along, letting her wail in front of us. Eventually, no one wanted to marry me, and I gave up on remarriage, focusing solely on raising my daughter. During this time, they caused my parents endless grief. They worried more about me than anything else. Even as they passed, they worried most about me. When the phone call went through, hearing my parents' voices after a lifetime made me cry. Hearing the sob in my voice, they got really worried, thinking Lisa had bullied me, wanting to confront her. I reassured them and shared everything that happened and my plans. They stayed silent for a long time, finally saying that if this was my well-thought-out decision, they'd respect it. That was a relief. I told them I was transferring back to North Sea City. The train ticket was for 3 days later. My parents promised to make all my favorite dishes and wait for me at home. Back at my dorm, I found Lisa at my desk, looking through my study materials. I almost forgot she had a set of keys too. Seeing the drawer with my transfer report locked tight was a relief. Our current status was unclear, so I didn't want any surprises before leaving. Lisa noticed me and quickly stood to pour a glass of water. She had something to say but hesitated. I sat on the bed, slowly sipping my tea, waiting. Finally, she couldn't hold it anymore. Turning to me, she said, "Eric, it's not what you think with Frank and me." I swallowed my tea. "What do I think?" I replied plainly. That stumped her. If I were still the Eric from before, I would have trusted her, whether she explained or not. But now, after living a lifetime, seeing and experiencing the misery of my own life, her explanations were meaningless to me. Before I died, she confessed by my bedside that she fell in love with Frank at first sight. It was true love, unlike our relationship. I was more like the third wheel in their romance, a nuisance. "Eric, whether you believe me or not, I just wanted to take care of Frank a bit more because he's all alone after losing his parents." When Lisa spoke, her eyes darted away. She couldn't even look into my eyes, so why should I trust her? But I said it anyway. "Okay, I believe you. Now could you leave? I've had a long day and need to rest. Oh, and could you leave my dorm key here?" Her face turned stone cold, clearly seeing through my lack of trust. After she left, I wiped the chair she sat on. Felt dirty, genuinely dirty. I started packing. After 6 months working here, I didn't have much, just some clothes, bedding, and personal items. What needed settling were the wedding purchases made with Lisa. I'll have to find time to sort those out before leaving. A knock on the door interrupted my thoughts. It was Lisa holding a box of pastries, offering it to me cheerfully. "Here, Eric, open it." I opened the box to find money and tickets. Smiling, Lisa said, "I've already thought it through. Once we're married, All my money will go to you. You just have to give me a monthly allowance. Looking at her, I felt like she was a stranger. After getting our marriage certificate, I haven't seen a single cent from her. When I got sick and couldn't afford treatment, her parents didn't give a penny, and they even said, "Let him die. It's a waste of money to keep him alive." It was my parents and siblings who paid the doctors to save me, and that's how I survived. Later, when her parents got sick, I paid for their medicine and their funerals. Even during the 20 years Lisa was missing, she secretly kept in touch with our son. I guess she kept in touch with her parents too. I don't know if she gave them any money. All I know is before Lisa's mom passed away, she called in my son. When he came out, he tried hard to look sad, but I could see a little happiness in his eyes. After the funeral, I searched her room but didn't find anything valuable. Later, I got sick again, couldn't afford treatment, and just let it drag on until it was too late. Thinking back on my past life, maybe Lisa knew I needed money for treatment. And maybe my son hid the money his grandma gave, not willing to use it for my treatment. My heart just ached. Lisa saw me suddenly trembling all over. She rushed forward to support me, but I pushed her away. I leaned against the wall, took a while to recover. When I looked at Lisa again, I was just cold. Lisa felt a chill in her heart. I looked at the money in the box. Since Lisa brought the money, I wasn't going to be the one shortchanged. We can't settle debts from the past life, but this life we can. I took half the money needed for our pre-wedding expenses out of the box and handed the rest to Lisa. She didn't understand my actions but didn't ask. Anyone could feel the change in me. She didn't understand what happened in those minutes. It seemed like something was slipping out of control. After confirming I was fine, she left, looking back every few steps. That night, I didn't sleep well. In my dream, Lisa's parents told her I was in critical condition. On the phone, she just said lightly. I also saw Lisa's parents secretly took our daughter, who was still a baby, to see Lisa. Lisa knew I was looking for her, but she hid from me with everyone's help. No wonder everyone who knew her wouldn't talk to me about it. I even dreamt of the colleagues I had worked with for years in the past life. They praised Lisa and Frank's love story. As for me, I was just the husband they said was the result of Cupid having drunk too much. What a joke. I woke up, tears soaking my pillow, but I'm still alive, healthy. Life still holds opportunities, doesn't it? In the following 2 days, I was busy with work arrangements. I agreed with Frank to meet and eat the food Lisa cooked. Since the money box incident passed with silence, I thought it'd be left alone. But then Frank came by that evening. He invited me over for dinner. Unable to refuse, I agreed. When it was dinner time, I headed over with a gift. Peeking through the fence, I saw Frank and Lisa hugging. Lisa's hand was where it shouldn't be on Frank. When they saw me, Lisa turned paler than ever. Frank looked terrified, quickly buttoning his nearly open shirt. Saying nothing, I turned and walked away. So much for the big dinner Frank invited me to. No need for the gift. Not long after, Lisa caught up with me. She grabbed my arm, eager to explain. "Eric, listen to me. Frank and I are not what you think," she said. "Oh really? Is it the two of you half-dressed, hugging each other? Or your hand being where it's not supposed to be?" These past 2 days, despite being busy with work stuff, I heard a lot from Uncle Wong. He can't stand mistresses, especially Frank's kind. Not only knowing they're third parties but flaunting it too. He's been giving real-time updates on Lisa and Frank's disgusting antics. He said people saw Frank intentionally rubbing up against Lisa and she didn't dodge. Others saw Frank and Lisa sharing a meal from the same bowl. Saw them holding hands in secluded places. At that moment, facing me, Lisa looked a mess. I couldn't figure out why she'd do all this with Frank, yet still come to me to clear up misunderstandings. Was she hoping for me to look after her parents at home while she and Frank enjoyed their romance elsewhere? Before Frank showed up, I was the only one close to you. Frank had only been around for an hour before you took him to the hospital with you. Within 3 hours, you allowed him to wrap his arms around your waist on the back of a bicycle. Within 5 hours, you left me to have a meal with him at the cafeteria. Within 7 hours, you let him stay in our marital home, sleep in our marital bed, using the bedding I prepared for our marriage. Within a day, you were willing to spend half a month's salary to treat him to a feast. Also, within a day, you were willing to personally cook a soup for him. You didn't evade his touch, shared a meal with him, held his hand. Now you were hugging him, touching him. Yet you stand before me promising that there's nothing wrong. You think I'll believe you? Maybe my words were too much for her. Lisa started trembling uncontrollably. Her lips moved, but she didn't have a word to say. Let me guess, why are you so desperate for me not to misunderstand? To believe you, even trying to buy me off. On the day we were meant to get our marriage certificate, you fell in love with Frank at first sight. Frank had feelings for you too. That's why he pretended to be injured and stopped us from getting married, I said. At that time, you weren't really interested in marrying me after developing feelings for Frank. But recently you figured out you loved Frank and wanted a life with him. At the same time, you need someone to care for your parents. Someone who can take care of them through old age and until the end, right? I said, looking into her eyes. Lisa looked up at me in shock with disbelief in her eyes. Seeing her stunned expression, it pained me. Pain from wasting my life on someone so scheming. Pain from realizing our so-called sweet moments were a joke. I couldn't lie to myself any longer. Similarly, I wouldn't allow Lisa to keep lying to me. That evening, I got back to my dorm, starting to pack my stuff for leaving. That's when Frank showed up. He looked at me with this nasty expression on his face. Eric, you're back too. Huh? He snarked when he saw how calm I was. There was disdain and mockery in his eyes, as if he was saying, in our past lives, despite you taking Lisa's husband's place, you still ended up as a servant to her parents. The son you worked hard to raise when you weren't looking called me dad. Isn't that hilarious? Frank went on, your wife is mine, your son is mine, and in this life, even with your rebirth, you can't change Lisa's love for me. I'll be her husband this time around, only me. Even though I was deeply disappointed in my daughter from my past life, knowing she called Frank dad still stung. But thankfully, this time, whether she likes it or not, I won't bring her into this world. Frank, like a cocky rooster, kept bragging in front of me. But when he looked into my eyes and saw pity, sympathy, and compassion, everything but anger, he took off. For me, he's just another poor soul like myself. This time, without me covering for them, can they still live a happy life like before? Around midnight, unable to sleep, I stepped out to look at the moon, only to be startled by a figure sitting at the door. Under the porch light, I saw it was Lisa. She reeked of alcohol. Who knows how long she'd been there. Even with this lifetime's experience, I still couldn't understand her. I grabbed a flashlight and went to find Frank. When Frank heard I was there to ask him to take Lisa home, he paused. Still, he followed me back to the dorm without a word. Lisa was asleep. Frank struggled to take her away. I didn't help. The woman she loves, she should sort out herself. The next day, as I was ready to leave with my luggage, Uncle Wong came by, wanting me to see the drama unfolding. We made our way to what used to be mine and Lisa's marital home. Lisa was furious, glaring at a disheveled Frank sitting on the floor. Turns out, after Frank brought her back home last night, recalling how she ran after me, came back heartbroken, fell asleep drunk at my dorm door, and even called out my name in her dreams, he couldn't stand it. Despite Lisa mistaking him for me in her drunken state, he slept with her. From what the villagers told me, I felt disgusted and turned to leave with my bags. But Lisa grabbed me and said, Eric, let me explain. Is this filthy woman for real? Taking a deep breath, I looked at her, unfazed. Lisa, I thought I made it clear yesterday. Lisa tried to see in my eyes if I still cared about her at all. But she was disappointed. I felt nothing for her, just indifference like she was a stranger. Indifference brought no anger, and no anger meant nothing mattered. She realized I truly didn't care about her anymore. Lisa let go of my hand weakly, and in a low voice, said I'm sorry behind me. What was she apologizing for? This life or the past? I left Yuanshan village. Back in City C, seeing my healthy and happy parents, I broke down. Despite appearing carefree, my rebirth's burden weighed heavily, all the pressure of my life before. It was suffocating. No way it could be shrugged off easily. Lisa and Frank, they could face a million cuts for all I care. But I had my parents, my brother, and his wife. I couldn't let two worthless people ruin my second chance. Seeing my parents, untouched by my previous hardships, healthy and well, I finally felt at peace. Spent a few days in family bliss, then threw myself back into work. Without the burden of a son or Lisa's parents, my work improved, leading to a promotion and pay raise. I was even hired as a professor by a university, achieving an old dream of mine. A year later, I heard about Lisa again. Frank fulfilled his past life's wish of marrying her. Soon after, Lisa took him back to City C. Lisa's parents were anything but pushovers. In the past, despite my good standing and job, they still looked down on me, let alone an unemployed Frank. They made his life miserable while Lisa's family was in chaos. Lisa wanted to leave with Frank, but her parents, angry at him for ruining things, refused. They made sure Frank stayed to serve them. Over time, Lisa saw Frank as just an ordinary guy. She later applied for a transfer and left him behind. Eventually, I heard Frank fought back. He and Lisa's parents tormented each other, both suffering. What surprised me was Lisa. In our past life, she resented me for Frank's regret and mourned bitterly at his photo. But this time, she didn't show that same lengthy affection for him. I overestimated her. In her core, she couldn't truly repent. She loved only herself. It wasn't genuine regret, just bitterness at loss or failure. Thankfully, this time I escaped that cage. My life's future is filled with sunlight.